Hi guys, and welcome to News Roundup episode 1.
That's right. We've got 4 cases to take a dip into this week. Now, as you know, our main episodes are deep dives. Here we just take a little dip into some cases.
Now you can always request for us to mention a case and look into a case by either requesting a case through our website at versionofevents.co.uk. Slide into our DMs. We're at Version of Events on pretty much every social media platform that you can think of. Or email us at versionofevents@gmail.com.
Yeah, we love hearing from you guys. So, should we dive in?
Let's go for it. Yeah. I'm gonna tell you all about Nicholas Prosper. Nicholas Prosper is a convicted 3-time murderer. He planned to murder his mother, Juliana Falcon, 48, his brother, Kyle Prosper, 16, and sister, Giselle Prosper, 13. He also planned to rape Giselle and then shoot up a primary school. He wanted to kill his family, while they slept. He shot his mother first. He placed a novel with the title How to Kill Your Family on her legs, and then shot Giselle before killing Kyle. Kyle had managed to arm himself with a knife in self-defense, but Prosper shot him in the chest and then stabbed him over 100 times while Kyle begged for his life.
Wow. And so Kyle's 16, Giselle's 13. Am I right in thinking Nicholas was 18?
Yes, you are correct. Yeah, it's one heck of a crime for an 18-year-old.
Yeah.
He had plans to leave his flat at around 8:30 in the morning to arrive at St. Joseph's School at 9 a.m, go into a classroom and pretend to rob the teachers, and then start shooting the 4-year-olds, continuing in another classroom if necessary to achieve the target of 30 children. The judge said, "You wanted to cause the biggest massacre in 21st century as though there had not been one. Your mother waking up at about 4:50 had triggered your activity early. You wish you had killed more." So, yeah, what the judge means by that is that his mother, to his mind, messed it up by waking up so he could no longer murder her in her sleep. Neighbours heard the shots and they called police at 5:29 a.m. Prosper left his flat at 5:33 a.m. and police arrived on scene at 5:50 and entered at 6:08 in the morning.
And just like entering that flat.
Yeah.
I mean, Kyle stabbed over 100 times.
Yeah.
I can't imagine what that was like to see.
The scene must have been absolutely horrendous, just horrific to witness.
And staged as well. Staged with the book.
Yeah.
It's all very it's all planned out.
Yeah. Oh, so much premeditation. So before we get into the sentencing of this case, I just want to give you a quick explanation of how life sentences work in the UK, which is where Nicholas committed his crime. Usually a life sentence is given, and life sentences have a finite prison sentence. So that's usually around 25 years, though it does vary from case to case. Alternatively, whole life tariffs can be given in cases that are particularly heinous, and whole life tariffs are being used by judges more and more these days. And a whole life tariff is what it says on the tin. You go to prison for the rest of your life, and that's where you die.
We've seen that in Lucy Letby, Kyle Clifford very recently.
Yeah.
So yeah, we do see them more now, I think,
Yeah.
don't we?
Levi Belfield is another one.
Yeah.
But in this case, the prosecution and the defense came together, and the judge said this in her sentencing remarks. Despite the gravity of your crimes, it is the explicit joint submission of counsel that a lengthy, finite term will be a sufficiently severe penalty. So they came together to request that, and she handed down a 49-year finite sentence, although he will remain on license for the rest of his life once he is
If he
released,
ever is,
after
yeah.
if he ever is. She did say in her remarks that she is unsure that he will ever be released. However, there is a chance.
So this is a joint submission by the prosecution and the defence.
Correct.
Obviously, that's what the defence are going to ask for. That's what they're there
Yeah.
for. That's
Yeah.
their job. The prosecution's job is to seek justice and public safety, and that doesn't always mean going for the maximum sentence, obviously. But in this case, I think it probably does. I think in this case they should be asking for a whole life tariff. This is what Nicholas Prosper did. What he actually did was bad enough. He killed his whole family. But he didn't want to stop there. He wanted to kill 30 children. He wanted to make it the biggest school massacre, biggest school shooting this century. And the only reason that didn't happen is because Juliana, his mother, woke up.
I agree with you totally, and your opinion is based off of what I've just told you. And what if I was to tell you that Nicholas Prosper gets worse?
It gets worse.
He gets worse. This man is a paedophile. He
Oh,
had 200 child abuse videos on his phone. And remember, he wanted to rape his 13-year-old sister. He joined a paedophile Twitter group to discuss his sexual attraction to children. Before he was arrested, he even tried to destroy 2 cell phones and admitted that he did this to protect his online paedophile friends from being arrested for child porn. So,
wow.
yeah, in my mind, that's the final nail in the coffin. You cannot rehabilitate a paedophile.
Well, yeah, but he's a triple murderer. He wanted to kill more. He wanted to be a rapist. And we now know that he's a paedophile who had child abuse images. I don't think that someone like that can be rehabilitated. But more than that, why would we want to? Why would we want to risk someone who has done what he has done, someone who wants to do what he wanted to do? Why do we want to run the risk of putting a person like that back into society?
I agree with you. That and his age, 18, he
Yeah,
has no real life skills. He'll be so institutionalized by the end of 49 years. He'll have no life skills to count on when he gets out. And I would imagine that puts him at a very high rate of reoffending.
yeah, I would have thought so.
Um,
And you've mentioned that the judge said she thinks she doubts that he'll get out. And okay, I mean, I might also doubt that he'll get out. I think it seems unlikely. But it's not up to her anymore. It's up to the parole board. It was up to
correct.
her. It was up to the judge at the sentencing to make sure he couldn't get out. And she didn't. I blame the
Correct.
prosecution for that, at least as much, because they should have asked for it. But if any case needs a whole life tariff, surely this is one of them.
I wholly agree. I find it shocking that they did not ask for a whole life tariff, and I find it even his age is really the reason that they come down to, but because he's a teenager. However, 18 makes him a legal adult.
Yeah.
Therefore, he can be sentenced like an adult.
And you said earlier, this is just so much evil, so much depravity and aberrant behaviour at that age. If he's this bad at age 18,
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
There's a lot of time to get worse, just,
And a lot of time to learn from people that are worse from him while he's in prison with them. Let's just have a chat about his arrest. By the time Prosper was arrested, he had abandoned the gun, but he retained a kitchen knife in his pocket. But once he was arrested, he displayed no signs of agitation or mental distress. In fact, he was inappropriately cheerful and engaged the officers in conversation. He went on to ask if the local schools were locked down because he wanted to know just how much chaos he had caused.
See, yeah, everything about him. Obviously, none of this is normal behaviour, but his reaction to being arrested is abnormal.
Yes.
I saw a clip of him just after he'd been arrested, where the first thing he was saying to the officers was, "It's not murder, it's not murder." And that's strange because he very quickly admitted to what he had done. There was no chance that he would ever, the evidence was obviously overwhelming. But his first thought, something that he'd obviously planned for, was to deny his crimes. And that's, again, he planned what he was going to say.
Mm-hmm.
It's all premeditated, and I really do feel that he would have got into that school and caused a massacre had it not been for Juliana waking up, and
Yeah, I agree with you.
she saved a lot of children's lives.
She did. Unfortunately, she died a horrific death.
Yeah.
But I think you're right. I think her waking up when she did, it did save a lot of children's lives and a lot of children from being injured and seriously injured at that. He's not shown any empathy, no remorse or sorrow. So that makes it even harder to understand the lack of a whole life tariff.
Yeah.
Because usually when there is a lack of remorse, the sentences are harsher than if there is remorse.
Yeah, lack of remorse is an aggravating factor.
Yeah.
Doesn't seem to have been much of one here.
No. That brings us on to some reporting that Nicholas Prosper has autism. However, this is incorrect. Dr. Kuhlman's conclusion is that although he has not undergone a formal diagnosis, he has traits of autism spectrum disorder, albeit not to a severe degree. The judge also went on to state that his autistic traits did not impair his ability to understand the nature of his conduct, exercise self-control, or form rational judgments when he decided to commit violent crime. And
I've seen everywhere that he's got autism.
Yeah.
And clearly he hasn't.
No, not if you read the sentencing remarks, because she clearly says that he has not undergone a formal diagnosis. And it strikes me that if Dr. Koeman, and I'm really sorry if I'm pronouncing that incorrectly, has said that he has some traits of autism, if he was that concerned, I imagine that he would have recommended that he be formally assessed and have a formal
Yeah.
diagnosis. But that doesn't appear to have happened. It's also, as she says, and she rejects entirely the notion that having these autistic traits reduced his capacity to understand what he was doing and therefore reduced his culpability. And I find it abhorrent as an autistic person that autism is used in criminal defences to suggest the person is less culpable when it is a developmental disorder, not an intellectual disorder.
Yeah. I mean, I'm glad that the judge rejected that, because there's this idea, it's trying to suggest that autistic people don't know right from wrong or don't have a moral compass. And that's just not true.
No, it isn't. It's quite the thing to tar all autistic people with that brush as well.
Yeah.
That is the case of Nicholas Prosper, and I wanted to end on that note with the autism because we are moving on to Bryan Kohberger, and that case is touched by autism too.
Yeah, almost as if we planned it. So Bryan Kohberger is accused of murdering 4 University of Idaho students, Kaylee Gonsalves, Madison Mogan, Zanika Nodal, and Ethan Chapin, at around 4 a.m. in their student house in Moscow, Idaho, on November 13th, 2022. Kohberger was arrested and charged, and he's awaiting trial, and that came after his DNA was found on a knife sheath that was left underneath one of the victims' bodies. That sheath fit a K-bar knife, a knife of the type that Bryan Kohberger owned and had bought from Amazon, was consistent with the wounds on the victims. His car was also seen and is on CCTV footage in the area, and his phone pinged throughout the night in the area of this house. So, obviously, of course, Bryan Kohberger is legally considered innocent until proven guilty. But that does seem like a very strong case, doesn't it?
It does seem like a very, very strong case, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I find the DNA evidence to be very compelling. That's his worst nightmare, to have his DNA on the scene. And then the cell phone and car evidence, that really just hammers it home. You know, that's...
And I think the strength of this case is kind of reflected in some of what the defence is putting forward. Because some of these recent filings, I think they're spaghetti filings. They're throwing spaghetti to see what sticks. And some of there's quite a few filings where they've various arguments relating to autism, OCD, and developmental coordination disorder. And the big argument that people have taken notice of is that they're saying the death penalty should be off the table because of his alleged autism. And we will get on to that. But there's some of the other ones that I wanted to take a look at first. The first argument that I had to have a look at was an argument that they made around developmental coordination disorder, also called dyspraxia. And the reason I looked at that is because I have dyspraxia and I wanted to see what are they saying. And I read this argument and it was absolutely bizarre. It was a very strange argument. And what they were saying is that because Kohberger apparently has coordination difficulties, it wouldn't be possible for him to carry out 4 murders in 20 minutes, which the state have said that he did, and they've done kind of experiments showing that someone could do that. They're saying it would be too difficult for Kohberger because he's got bad coordination. This is just nonsense. It's just not true. What Bryan Kohberger is alleged to have done, these are large, gross movements. It's not precision. It's not precise tasks that he's doing. He's not dissecting anything. It's walking into a room and and stabbing someone.
Mm.
And I don't want to sound dismissive, but it's not a delicate task.
Yeah.
So yeah, this argument made no sense to me at all.
Yeah, I think what really kind of tickled me was when it came out that his Strava app has him running 6-minute miles, which involves good coordination.
Yeah, I mean, I don't mind telling you, I'm nowhere near a 6-minute mile. And that's mostly because I'm not very fit. But also, yeah, the coordination would be a problem. If Kohberger can do a mile in 6 minutes, his coordination can't be that bad.
Yeah, it seems like a really desperate grab.
And there's another argument that they made, and this is another quite important one in this particular motion, where they're trying to get into evidence his diagnoses of autism, OCD, and possibly developmental coordination disorder. They were a bit non-committal on whether he's got a formal diagnosis of DCD. The defence writes, the way that the public perceives the behaviours and mannerisms of someone with ASD may be prejudicial. Others may misinterpret and misidentify Mr. Kohberger's behaviours and cast them in a more sinister light. And so they then explain various ways in which they say Bryan Kohberger's mannerisms are unusual. The ones that they put first are that he apparently he stares at people sometimes, and he doesn't show very much emotion. But there are other examples, one of which is that he often uses long words. I'm not sure at what point people are viewing someone who uses long words as sinister. That really is a stretch.
Yeah, that is a stretch.
I mean, the mannerisms that they describe, apparently staring and showing little emotion, these are things that, in general, I don't think people would think too much of. But if people think Bryan Kohberger is sinister, I think there are reasons for that other than particular mannerisms. People find him sinister because there is very strong evidence that he murdered 4 people in cold blood.
Absolutely.
He's sinister because he's going to be on trial for that. People aren't prejudiced against him because of his mannerisms. People who've seen the evidence rightly find him quite a scary person.
Absolutely. I think that anyone is going to find a murder suspect sinister, regardless of whether they've got autism or not. I think, again, it's just awful that it's being used as a defence. I think there are some other claims that they've made that really ground my gears, as the saying goes. And that is that defendants with ASD are less able to meaningfully assist their counsel, and people with ASD make poor witnesses. The first one, defendants with ASD are less able to meaningfully assist their counsel. He's a PhD criminology student. If he can't meaningfully assist his counsel, then how can this bog standard person meaningfully assist their counsel?
It's ridiculous. He's got a head start on everyone else.
He's described as highly intelligent, high functioning, and the reports into his autism from his experts state that he has no problem with communication.
Yeah, his experts haven't actually helped him on quite a few of these things.
Yeah.
But yeah, these are some of the arguments that they've made in the motion to take the death penalty off the table. And the overarching claim of all of that is they say this very directly, that because Bryan Kohberger is autistic, he is less culpable for his actions. And that's not true. It wasn't true for Nicholas Prosper. It's not true for Bryan Kohberger.
No.
Autism doesn't make you less responsible for your actions.
No, it doesn't. It really doesn't. And I just want to put this pondering out there that I thought it was interesting that they say that people with ASD make poor witnesses, because most of the time in murder cases, certainly in America, more so I think in America than in UK, defendants choose not to take the stand, and they have every right not to take the stand. So does this mean they're saying he makes a poor witness and therefore his right to take the stand is diminished somehow? Or that he wanted to take the stand?
If they're even considering for a second putting Bryan Kohberger on the witness stand, they're going to have a bad time. I cannot think of a worse idea than putting him on the stand at this trial. Also, it's just not true to say that anyone with autism is going to be a poor witness. I think Bryan Kohberger would be a poor witness because the prosecution are going to hammer him on where he was that night. Why is his DNA at the scene? Why does he have so many knives? What about his bushy eyebrows? It's not going to go well. That's because there's very strong evidence linking him to 4 murders. It's not because he's autistic.
Absolutely. Before we get into the final bit of that filing to take the death penalty off of the table, you found a great quote, Jess, about autism from Autism Ontario.
Yeah, and I thought this was really relevant to both of the cases we've kind of opened with today. And what they've said is, autism should not be used as a legal defence to evade responsibility for criminal actions. Autism is not synonymous with violence or a lack of a moral compass, and it should not be equated with mental health issues. Regrettably, we often witness the oversimplification of autistic individuals, which results in unwanted stereotyping.
And I think that says it spot on.
It's absolutely bang on. And I wanted to check this. We both did. So we looked at the statistics. We looked at studies. Autistic people are no more likely to be violent than counterparts without autism.
It's sad that it's so misunderstood as a disorder, a condition. A lot of autistic people don't like that it's called a disorder. I tend to agree with that, but that's ASD is what it's called, so that's what we're going by for the sake of the episode.
Yeah. What they're doing is worse than just using the word disorder. They're painting all autistic people as sinister and potentially violent, and not just kind of violent in the sort of, some people might have an image of an autistic child having a meltdown. Not violent in that way. Oh no, violent in the sense of allegedly planning and carrying out the murders of 4 people.
Now, the final bit and the most interesting bit is the defense citing Atkins, which is a Supreme Court decision that Jess looked into a while back. Do you want to explain Atkins and how they've kind of messed up here?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a Supreme Court case, Atkins v. Virginia, and that's the Supreme Court case that ruled it's unconstitutional to execute people with intellectual disabilities. And I looked into that case a while ago because I was looking into the case of Purvis Payne, who was sentenced to death and had his sentence overturned because it was later ruled that he was intellectually disabled. And Kohberger's defence refer to Atkins a lot. And as I was reading it, I thought, Atkins doesn't apply to autism. Atkins is about intellectual disability. Those things are very separate. They're very separate diagnostically. They're very separate legally. But Atkins as well. Atkins has very clearly set rules. There's a set test for what is classified as an intellectual disability. One part of this test, I think it's a 3-part test. One part of it is that the person's IQ has to be below 70 to be considered intellectually disabled. Bryan Kohberger was a PhD student doing criminology. He's described as highly intelligent and high functioning. His IQ is nowhere near as low as 70. Atkins is not for him. So not only is it kind of Not only is autism just not classified under intellectual disability, the prosecution, in their response to the defence motion, they quote Bryan Kohberger's diagnosis, where it says he explicitly does not have an intellectual disability. So whichever way they slice it, the Atkins exemption for the death penalty does not apply to Bryan Kohberger, and I think the judge will reject this motion pretty quickly.
I imagine they will, yes. It seems like you say, throwing spaghetti at the wall to see what sticks.
It's desperate. I have to say, if I was Bryan Kohberger, God forbid, I'd be very, very worried. Why are my attorneys messing around with this stuff when there's all this evidence piling up against them?
Yeah.
They're going into a trial where it looks really, really bad, and these filings will not get anywhere. All they're going to do, they're not going to do anything for Kohberger. They'll damage autistic people who aren't Bryan Kohberger, so thank you for that. And at some point, Kohberger's lawyers need to realise that they're about to lose this trial.
I think they're going to lose this trial as well, and I think that finding him guilty is the correct verdict. That is just my opinion.
Just an opinion, allegedly.
Yeah. But we will see what happens when it comes to trial. And so moving on to our third case this episode, we're discussing Toyah Cordingley, which means we are visiting our friends down under. Toyah Cordingley was a 24-year-old woman who was found dead on Wangeti Beach after taking her dog for a walk on the 22nd of October 2018. Toyah was stabbed at least 26 times in what was called a frenzied, brutal, and sadistic attack. Her body was found half buried in the sand dunes by her father.
Oh my goodness.
Mm.
So that poor man.
Yeah, I can't imagine the amount of mental health issues he must live with now, having gone through that trauma. But the suspect, Rajwinder Singh, 40, a former hospital nurse, fled to India just hours after Toyah's body was discovered, leaving behind his wife and 3 children, stopped paying the mortgage on the house that they lived in, and he was arrested by police in New Delhi and extradited back to Australia in 2023.
So this guy's Rajwinder Singh, hours after Toyah Cordingley's body's found, he just runs off to India, leaves his family, doesn't pay the mortgage for no apparent reason.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
Nothing suspicious about that.
Yeah. At the time of Toyah's murder, Singh lived 2 hours away in Innisfail. Aussie listeners, please correct me if I said that wrong. There were no eyewitnesses to Toyah's murder, so all of the evidence gathered is considered circumstantial. However, the prosecution gave cell phone evidence that showed the victim's phone moving in the same direction as Mr. Singh's blue Alfa Romeo sedan on the day she went missing. The court also heard that a DNA sample taken from a stick inside Toyah's shallow grave was a likely match for Mr. Singh. And it's more than a likely match, it's over 3 billion times more likely to be Mr. Singh than any other person on the planet.
Yeah, that's not so much likely as a near certainty, really.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, you said no eyewitnesses and it's a circumstantial case.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes people hear circumstantial and they think, oh, circumstantial, that means weak case. No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. An eyewitness who is there might have some direct evidence. They might have seen Rajwinder Singh. They might have not seen him, and then that would be a problem. But an eyewitness can get their times wrong. They could get the wrong day. They could describe someone wrongly. That's all considered direct evidence. Circumstantial evidence that you're told this is, for example, the phone and the car are going in the same direction, and the jury can make an inference about that. They can say that means the phone was in the car, for example. That's circumstantial evidence, and it's strong. And DNA is circumstantial evidence. Rajwinder Singh's DNA in that grave is considered circumstantial evidence, because from that we can infer that he touched that stick as he dug Toyah's grave.
Yeah.
That's why, and so that is very strong evidence. This just seems like an incredibly strong case.
It does, doesn't it? Mr. Singh, however, he denies murdering Toyah Cordingley. He told a court in New Delhi, "I did not kill the woman." Charming. And after he was returned to Australia, he went on to claim that he would reveal all the details to a court, and then went on to tell Australian reporters that there were 2 killers and 2 victims. Now, one has to question how he knew this if he had nothing to do with the murder, and there doesn't appear to be any evidence to support the claims that Mr. Singh has made. There has been no second victim discovered, anything like that. So it seems like he's throwing spaghetti at the wall as well.
I tell you, you know what people who are actually innocent don't tend to do? Start making up that they know special details about a murder. That's not a very innocent thing to do.
No, it's not. So Mr. Singh went to trial, and it recently ended in a hung jury, which is disappointing, to say the least.
A hung jury?
Yes, a hung jury, yeah.
Wow.
And Justice Henry said that a hearing would take place on the 26th of March. So at the time of recording, that's 2 days away, to set a retrial date. He added that a further delay in conclusion to the case would be a sad thing for all concerned, which is very true. It is a sad thing. I feel awful for Toyah's family having to go through this again, having to see evidence like autopsy photographs and things again. That's just not how anybody should see a loved one ever.
Her poor dad, he found her on the beach, and he has to go through that again.
Yeah.
I don't understand this. What else did the jury want? What else could they have been given? His DNA is at the scene, in her grave. The phone and the car are going the same way.
Yeah.
And he fled the country. He did a runner.
Yeah. And then he made up a bunch of shit to try and pull the wool over people's eyes. I don't understand
what else do you want him to do except stand up and say, "I'm guilty"?
Which it's not likely that he will do. But all we can do is hope that the second trial, which will be going ahead, I imagine that prosecutors in Australia will want to carry on. They've got a strong case, and hopefully they will take this opportunity to really polish their case, tighten it up a little bit, consider different methods of questioning witnesses maybe, and going from there. We will keep you updated on anything else that comes up in this case, and certainly the next, when we know what the next trial date is, etc., we will post that on our social medias. And we'll just keep you. This is one that has kind of captured me, so I'll be keeping up with it all the way through. And it's almost like we've planned it again. The next case also has somebody that fled the country.
May, in fact, have fled to India, yeah.
Yeah.
So the case that we're going to look at is the murder of Harshita Brella. She was 24, and last November she was found strangled in the boot of her husband's Vauxhall Corsa, which was parked up in Ilford in East London. So that was November last year. Last week, or a couple of weeks ago, in March 2025, Pankaj Lamba, her husband, was charged with murder, along with 2 counts of rape, sexual assault, and coercive or controlling behaviour. But as we said, he fled the country. He's believed to have fled the country. So he was charged in absentia, not in person, because he hasn't been found. The police haven't said where they think he is, but Lamba is originally from India, so it's reasonable to believe that he might have gone there. But it's not only reasonable to say that. Harshita's family have been very clear that they believe they have solid information that he did return to India. Specifically, they say that he flew to Delhi and arrived there on November the 12th last year. So before Harshita's body was even found. Families say that they think he may be somewhere in Haryana or near Chandigarh. Those are 2 states in northern India. And interestingly, in Haryana, there's a village of around 2,000 people called Daroli. That's where Lamba's from. His family still live there. So there's good reasons to suspect that he either is or has been there since November last year.
Yeah, I mean, we know that families of murderers can sometimes support them when they're on the run. Just look at Brian Laundrie in the Gabby Petito case. His parents definitely knew more than they let on.
Absolutely.
So it wouldn't surprise me if this happened in this case as well.
And I think there are good reasons to suspect that. We now know that the charge came after the reports emerged from India that Pankaj Lamba's parents, Sunil Devi and Darshan Singh, were arrested on March the 14th in India. Now, his sister Uma is still being sought by police, but the authorities have arrested his parents and they've registered the case under the offence of dowry death. And dowry death involves the death of a woman if she was subjected to cruelty or harassment for or in connection with a dowry demand.
Oh, God. That's horrendous.
It's awful.
That does make me even more suspicious that his parents know something about his location.
Yeah, I agree. And the background of what happened to Harshita is really upsetting, because we know that she was being abused by him, and we know that her family were very concerned about this abuse. Harshita's mother, Suresh Kumari, has said that Lamba was making her life miserable. She said, "I will not go back to him. He will kill me."
Gosh. So essentially what has happened here is this lovely, vibrant young lady, Harshita, predicted her own death.
Yeah.
And
Predicted her own death.
She was not the first to do so, and she will not be the last, which makes it even worse.
Yeah. And Harshita didn't just tell her mother about this abuse. Her father said that she called him crying and said that he had beaten her really badly. And that was on August 29th last year. And we know that Harshita made a report of domestic abuse against Lamba to the police in August. And Lamba was arrested on September the 3rd. Just one small point there. August 29th to September the 3rd. That's too long to arrest someone for domestic abuse.
Yes, it is.
It's too long to arrest a dangerous abuser. And it gets worse after that, actually, because after being arrested, Lamba was released on bail Harshita was granted a domestic violence protection order against him, and his bail conditions will have said you're not allowed to go near Harshita Brella. The domestic violence protection order will stay the same, and Lambert clearly completely ignored this order, ignored his bail conditions, and continued his control over Harshita.
I think it's important here to recognise that he was likely released angry at Harshita because she had made the very brave step to call the police and ask for help. And so it would have been a very dangerous time for her. And nobody was there, it sounds like, to get her out of that situation. And we know that leaving an abusive relationship is the most dangerous time within that abusive relationship. And it can take up to 7 attempts before a woman or a man from a domestic abuse relationship, but in this case, a woman manages to leave and stay away.
If the police are going to release alleged domestic abusers on bail, then they cannot and should not be doing that, bailing them when they know where their victim lives, when they can go back there. Because giving them a slip of paper saying you can't go there doesn't make a difference. It didn't make a difference to Pankaj Lambert. It doesn't make a difference to other men either.
No, it doesn't. I think, in my little ideal world, people that are arrested and charged with a violent crime, domestic violence included, they should not be released on bail because women shouldn't have to hide, in my opinion. And I know that it's an ideal world and it doesn't always work like that in the real world. But something does have to change. We know that, at least. And I think everyone can agree that something needs to change. I'm not saying that my answer is the answer. It's just how I feel.
I think when there's enough evidence to charge, I definitely support remanding them in custody. In cases where police don't have enough evidence to charge and they can't hold someone longer and they do have to release them on bail legally, in that situation, if the victim in that situation is still in their home, they're in real serious danger.
Yeah.
Like Harshita was. And they should be in a women's shelter. They should be being protected, not just left to be abused, not to be beaten, and in Harshita's case, murdered.
Not just left defenseless.
Yeah.
We know that Harshita was last seen alive on November the 10th, walking with Lambert. And police believe that he murdered her that night before concealing her body and fleeing the country. And I think it's important that we point out that he drove Harshita's body 80 miles away from where they lived. And I think he chose London and to park in London because he could then access really good public transport all the way to Heathrow or Gatwick, which are international airports.
And there's sometimes a kind of a concept that domestic violence murders are done in the heat of passion. They're not premeditated. In this instance, whatever happened in the moment when Pankaj Lambert allegedly killed Harshita Brella, what he did afterwards, concealing her body, driving 80 miles away, making it harder for her to be located, and making it easier for him to get out of the country. That shows quick thinking, clear-minded thinking after carrying out a monstrous crime. That's not heat of passion. That is cold-blooded. It's not just something that happened.
No, it's
There
not.
was planning and careful execution of a cover-up.
Before Harshita died, one of the couple's neighbours reported hearing 2 blistering rows involving one where a woman sounded scared in the days before Miss Brella's body was found. And when I say reported, I think that was to a journalist. I don't think they contacted the police. And, usually I'm one to say, leave your neighbours be. But there are cases where calling the police is the right thing to do. And I think if a woman sounds frightened, that's time to call it in.
I think it's important for us to just say as well that Harshita Brella didn't deserve what happened to her. And if you have been in an abusive relationship or you are in an abusive relationship now, you don't deserve abuse either. You don't.
No.
You deserve love and you deserve to be safe. And
it is not your fault. No matter what they tell you, it is not your fault.
If you are in that kind of relationship, then there are services that you can reach out to. There's Women's Aid. If necessary, you could call the police. There are other charities as well. If you can do that in a way that is safe, then we'd urge you to to try and get help and support in leaving.
Absolutely. And if you need to talk to anybody and you feel like there's nobody to talk to, please shoot us an email at versionofevents@gmail.com. We are here to listen, and we are here to try and point you in the right direction for getting out safely and moving forward in your life. I think that's a sad end to our first episode of News Roundup, but such an important story to tell.
Yeah, absolutely. And at least we got to laugh at Bryan Kohberger earlier anyway.
Yes, we did. We did get to laugh at Bryan Kohberger earlier. So there is always that.
Always a bright side.
Yeah. But we want to thank you for listening. Don't forget to follow us wherever you listen to our podcast and leave us a cheeky little 5-star review if you wouldn't mind. We'd appreciate it massively.
Pretty please.
And yeah, we will see you in the next one, guys.
Catch you soon, everyone. Bye.
Bye.